Welcome back to another edition of the Tuddle Daily Podcast. I got a very special guest, and I want to thank my producer, Vulture, for booking this guy, because Chester Santos. I'm really, really interested in this, and there are so many questions that I have for him. And right now on the Tuddle Daily Podcast is the one and only, the international man of memory, Chester Santos. Chester, how are you today, buddy?
I'm doing great. So thank you so much for having me on the show, Tuddle. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking with you today and giving some tips for your listeners, for your audience, as to how they can improve their memory skills.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling my dad this, Wayne, because we were watching Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I don't know if you're a big Coen's brother fan. Have you ever watched any of the Coen brothers movies?
I haven't seen. I'm not familiar with that particular movie.
Like Fargo,
Fargo,
New Country for Old Men. You know, they did all those movies, and it was really, really cool. And I was telling them about, I'm talking to this guy that's supposed to have the best memory that is out there, and I was telling them about it. But before we get into why I brought it up, I wanted to ask you, where can people find out about you? You know, where can they find you? What's your website if they want to contact you? Any of the stuff that people want to be able to find you at, where can they do that?
Yeah, so if people end up, after today being interested in in-depth memory training, how to remember names, presentations, facts, figures, languages, and so on, training material, they can go to memoryschool.net. I would visualize a giant net so you remember that it's .net. So memoryschool.net. And for your audience, there's a special code that I set up, Tuddle. So they would just type in Tuddle and they'll find a really special offer there. If they enter in that coupon code, they'll get started without any enrollment fee whatsoever. So, they can check it out if they're interested. If they want to follow me on social media, Instagram is probably the best place, Chester J. Santos on Instagram.
Now, Chester, you kind of actually set me up for one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You were talking about net, trying to get people to remember things. Is memory easier when you can associate things visually with it? Because you brought up like net, if you can't remember net, just think of a big net, so is that something that is key to training yourself to have a good memory, to be able to recall things?
Yeah, it really is. So there are three main principles that memory champions like myself would always employ if we're trying to commit something to memory. So I won the United States National Memory Championship. In that competition, we have to memorize decks of playing cards, hundreds of digits, hundreds of names in just a matter of minutes. In order to do that, we use specific techniques, but the three main principles are always, number one, visuals, as you just picked up on there. So turn whatever information type it might be that you're trying to remember, try to turn it first into something that you can see in your mind, picture, because we're really good at remembering things that we see. An example, let's say you run into someone. A lot of times we've experienced this. You'll run into someone that you could have met even years in the past. You remember their face, right? But you know that you've met them somewhere before, but you can't seem to remember their name, right? Pretty common experience.
Yeah, of course.
One other quick example. Let's say you go to a party, you're meeting a lot of new people. 2 weeks after it's over, you're talking with one of your friends that was at the party with you, and your friend describes someone to you. Hey, Tuddle, remember that attorney that we met at the party a couple of weeks ago? He's also a member of the local golf club. As your friend is going through that description, a lot of times you can picture who they're describing, right?
Yes.
But yeah, you can picture the person, but neither one of you can manage to remember the name, right? So those are just a couple of examples that I think illustrate pretty well that we tend to be good at remembering things that we see. We remember the face because we see the face. We don't remember the name because we don't actually see the name. So one of the techniques for names would be to turn the names into powerful visuals. So the name Mike, you might see a microphone. Alice, you might visualize a white rabbit because that would remind you of Alice in Wonderland. but it's always going to come down
Wow.
to visuals, no matter the information type. That's at least one of the ideas, one of the concepts.
Okay, so while we're on this, because I'm really all over the place, but I do have a good memory, but it's weird how it works sometimes, and I want to talk about the things that are triggers for me. But I was a big fan of the TV show The Mentalist. Did you ever watch the TV show The Mentalist? It had Thomas. The guy was like an illusionist, but he talked about this thing, and I want to see if you ever heard of this, and I want to see if they just made this up for the show, but a mind palace. They always talked about a mind palace, a palace. Now, they tried to explain it as when you are trying to remember things in order, you put them in a place in a certain like physical space, like a room, and that helps you being able to remember what things are. Or am I way off basis? Was the TV show just making up things?
No, so you're absolutely right there. So that has been depicted in other TV shows as well. I know that Sherlock
Yes.
was one. Apparently, they talked about Sherlock Holmes using a memory palace or mind palace. So it's some people wonder, is that like a real thing? It actually is. This concept originated with the ancient Greeks. It was known as the method of loci, LOCI, meaning
Mhm.
location. It was
Okay.
also used by the Romans. The Roman orators were able to give speeches hours in length from memory without any notes whatsoever. The famous orator Cicero used this type of technique. Modern memorizers like myself refer to this as the journey method, but it's also known sometimes as the memory palace technique. It's exactly what you described, using locations from your environment to store images that represent or remind you of the information that you later want to recall. You'll store the images along those locations. So later on, you merely think of the locations, the images come right back to you and remind you of whatever it is you were trying to remember. It's actually pretty easy for anyone to do with a little bit of training and practice.
Um, and I thought about this, and it was just a serious question. And maybe it's a dumb question, but is there a difference between memorizing something and learning something? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because some people, they just learn it, like it becomes muscle memory to them. Like they know that 2 times 2 is 4, or 2 times 4 is 8. I don't think or is that memory? Like, I mean, is that a dumb question?
Yeah, so the two things, they go hand in hand. So memory in of itself alone is not really fully learning the information, but memory is a fundamental part of the learning process. So memory definitely can help you to finally learn the material in the end. So you might want to look up, if you're not familiar with something called Bloom's taxonomy of learning,
Mhm.
and in that understanding, that explanation of how learning works, the fundamental part, the foundation, is memory. So in other words, you commit the information first to memory, and then it allows you to better manipulate it, play around with it in your mind, right? Turn it over, and
Yeah,
eventually it will improve your understanding as well, right?
yeah.
So memory is definitely a fundamental part of the learning process. It will help you, improving your memory skills will definitely help you to learn new things.
All right. So you brought up about you're remembering the cards in a deck. I hadn't seen the movie, and it's really really weird. Right before I even knew that I was going to be speaking with you, the movie 21, where they're counting cards during blackjack. Now, it seemed like a lot of those people were math whizzes. They were math people. Now, are you good at math? Or are you just good at memorizing the cards that you have already seen?
Yeah, so you know, it's math is something different. I just happened to be really good with math as well in school. Probably being able to remember very easily the formulas that I needed given a certain type of problem on the exam. That was probably an advantage. But I did do well in math. It is card counting. that you would use in blackjack in the casino is actually more mathematical. It's a more of the MIT blackjack team.
So you're talking about odds, right? You're talking about odds of what the next card is going to be instead of remembering the cards that have already come out.
So it is more of a mathematical process. They make decisions as to how to bet based on what the count is. These types of techniques that I teach people actually, though, would help you to keep track of the count. And then the math part is you're going to make certain calculations based on what the count is at that time. In the movie, it's very interesting. In the movie 21, they actually use a memory system to help them.
They use word association, right? They use word association.
Exactly. Not only to help them keep track of the count, but also to kind of secretly communicate the account to each other. So when they say a word, like a code word, that represents actually a number. That's actually a memory system that they're using there. But card counting is more mathematical than memory, although memory can, again, help you to keep track of the count.
Now, can I ask you, what is easier to memorize, numbers or letters?
I would say numbers or letters. It depends on the particular person, but numbers tend to be more difficult for people in that it's abstract. Numbers is more difficult rather than words, right, or images. So the system that I would teach people to memorize numbers, whether it's dates, percentages, facts that contain figures, it would be to turn single numbers, single digits, first into a sound, all right, that could correspond to a letter. Basically, what happens then is when you have a combination of numbers, you can form a word from that combination of numbers.
You don't have to go into detail, but like kind of give me an idea. Like how do you turn like numbers into a letter? Are you giving each letter a numerical numeration, like A would be 1, B would be 2?
Yeah, so this is actually an ancient system. Well, it's more than 300 years old. It's been known by many different names. It's been known as the major system is one, the phonetic alphabet system. When I'm teaching it in my online programs, I refer to it as the phonetic alphabet system because I think that best describes how it actually works. So first step is the single digits 0 through 9. You assign either a phonetic sound or series of phonetic sounds to it. I won't go into detail. It takes about an hour to learn the system. But basically, once you know it, if you were going to learn, the number sequence was 3, 5, 7, 9, 1, 2, I would memorize that by maybe visualizing a gigantic milk carton and it's filled with buttons. Because for me, 3, 5, 7 is milk and 9, 1, 2 is buttons. So 3, 5, 7, 9, 1, 2 would be milk, and maybe it's filled up with buttons. And that's because 3 has the sound, 5 has the sound, 7 has the k sound. So that's how it works. Again, it might sound a little bit complicated right now, but really it only takes about an hour to learn it. And then you can start to apply it right away to any really information type of numbers.
All right. So this is something that I've always been interested in, is that I've done a lot of reading. When you are younger, it just seems like the human brain is more of a sponge. Like it just take things in easier. Now, is there somebody that is there hope for people that are in their 30s or maybe 40s to be able to still memorize things and learn how to memorize things better? Or is this something you have to learn when you're younger? Because like I said, they've always said that's why it's easier for kids to learn multiple languages when they're young, because they said something about that the human or the younger brain is able to define different sounds to be able to memorize them.
Yeah, so we are born with our brains like sponges because we need that ability to learn new things, acquire new information in order to survive, right? And we reinforce that throughout all of our early years. We are constantly learning a lot of new things, right? When you're in preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, junior high, high school, college, grad school, throughout all of that chunk of years there, you're learning a lot of new things. You're tested on your recall of information for quizzes, exams, to write papers, right? But then we all tend to enter this 20, 30 plus year period where things really just start to become a routine, right? We're doing the
Yeah.
same types of things day in and day out. Most people no longer use their memory nearly as much as they did earlier in their life, right? And your
Yeah.
brain in general is much more stimulated earlier in your life because a lot is new to you. But we reach a point in our lives where, you know what, nowadays not that much is new to us anymore, right? So that's a large part of the reason why memory ability tends to decline as we're getting older, because as we're getting older, we're separating ourselves more and more from those early years in which we are constantly using our memory and which our brain was being very stimulated. The good news, the positive news from this is that if you make it a point to actually exercise your memory and continue to work it out, you can keep it strong and in fact improve your memory really at any age. But you've got to work at it. You've got to keep on using your memory. We're at a low point maybe, and one of the low points anyway, I think, in human history nowadays in terms of memory and also other mental abilities, because we're outsourcing memory and other mental functions to electronic devices. We're entering an age of maybe a little bit dangerous digital dependency. You know, we all used to be able to remember the phone numbers of so many friends, family members.
Oh
I
yeah,
remember.
dude. I got a buddy. He broke his phone, and like I fell out of contact with him, and I ran into him. He was like, "Hey, dude, I'm so glad I ran into you. I didn't even remember your phone number because it was on my other phone, and I broke it or I lost it. I don't have your number." Yeah, that's happened so many times.
Yeah, you know, growing up, my parents would also give me emergency numbers that they thought were important for me to know, you know, in case of emergency.
Yes.
We all used to be able to do that. Nowadays, you give somebody one phone number and they feel completely paralyzed. They can't do it. And it's getting so bad that there are a lot of people out there today that don't even know their own phone number. Really, that's how bad it's getting. We're becoming very dependent on these devices. It's navigation is another area. You know, now you
Oh,
have, you have people, nothing against Uber and Lyft drivers, and this is not every Uber and Lyft driver at all, but I'm just giving this as an example. It does happen where you might have someone that's been driving in a city for, 5+ years, but if something's wrong with the app at that particular
yeah.
moment, or something's wrong with the network connection, they can't even go to common landmarks in the city even after driving there for many years because they would just shut off their brain. They didn't
Yes.
learn. They didn't learn any streets because they
No,
were 100% dependent on the technology.
this is always a skill that I've ever always been able to have. Like if I drive, now I'm not talking about riding along with somebody, but if I am driving and I'm in control of the car and I have to drive to a location, I only need one time. Like when I drive there, I don't know what it is. It's like without even thinking about it. It's not even like I have to remember the names of the streets or stuff. It's more visually. Like I couldn't tell anybody directions how to get there, but if you told me, "Hey, I need you to drive to this spot you've already been to," I could easily do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And humans are pretty good for the most part with visual spatial memory. This is why the journey method memory palace technique works really well, because this is built into us actually as humans, if we're paying attention, if we're actually paying attention. Because at one point, in human history, if we went on a journey, we had to remember where there was danger, where there was food, and things like that. So if we're actually paying attention when we're going somewhere, we have a very good ability to remember those locations again later on. And that's why this memory palace technique can be very effective.
How were you in history? Because history has always been great to me. Like I think history is not shown enough attention when it comes to studies, because a lot of people want to talk about medical advances and people having longer lifespans, and you brought that up. Where dangerous is that I think history is a big part of us as humans having longer lifespans, because we look at history, we learn from other people's mistakes to make sure that we don't make those own mistakes. Or is that just some like weird stoner type thing to say? Because I really do think that's the truth.
No, I totally agree. I think that history is a very valuable subject to invest time in as far as learning, as far as your lifelong learning. I do think that history is definitely valuable to learn from, what's happened in past civilizations and so forth. So I totally agree with that.
Now, so let's talk about this, because I got a couple of other important questions. So number one, music. Why is music so important for stirring up emotions and bringing you back to a certain time in your life? I mean, you might not even have heard this song for the past 10 years, but when you hear it, it brings you back to that moment. You can remember the smells, if that makes sense, or how the weather was and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly on why music is such a
But I didn't know if that was
powerful.
a memorizing technique, is what is the reason I brought it up.
Okay, well, in terms of using it as a technique, a song to help you remember something that you're trying to remember for business, or whether, maybe it's an exam for school, um, it would work if you tend to be good with music, right? So if
Yeah.
you're someone that's good at, rhythm, remembering lyrics of a song, you could then tie new information to that song, because learning and memory always comes down to creating a connection in your mind between something new that you're trying to learn and something that you already know. So if you're very comfortable with music and you have a lot of songs that you already have committed to memory, you could definitely use those to learn some new information. So I do recommend that when I'm helping people to develop their memory skills, to use that if they're naturally good with music. I'm personally not that good for whatever reason with
Yeah.
music, so I would go about things probably in a different route. But music can be a very effective memory aid. Another part of it might be if it invokes powerful emotions in you, because that also can strengthen memories if there's a strong emotional
So
connection.
emotions and memories are connected in some way, sometimes.
Well, it's very interesting, because a powerful emotional experience can more solidly encode something into your memory for sure, to where you can't even get rid of it if you wanted to. But I think if it's even maybe a little bit too extreme, or in other circumstances, it can also cause memory blocks.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
All right. So I apologize, because when I do interviews, I think of other things off of answers that people give me, and I've had people on my show that have dealt with childhood trauma, and this is why that I
Yeah.
think that the brain is so important, that we can remember some things, but our brain is also protecting us in some ways and blocks out things that that we necessarily remember, but our brain somehow has this way of putting up that block to put that, if I'm comparing it to a computer, take that little infected part of the hard drive and partition it and put it somewhere else so we don't have to deal with it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. The brain is incredibly fascinating, and there are just still so many things that we don't understand about how the brain works as of today. But it is an incredibly fascinating, interesting. Again, sometimes a strong emotional experience can make it easier to remember something, or it can lead to, as you just described,
With trauma.
a memory block. Yeah, in term when it comes to trauma.
I just find that very interesting. Now,
Yeah.
I've been reading some stories. They're talking about that even though computers are becoming more advanced, it still does not have the processing power that the human brain has, that it's able to pull up things as quickly as they do. Is that true, or am I off basis by saying that?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at the current stats as of this year, but I know a few years or so, just a few years or so ago, when I was looking into this, when I was going to be speaking at a tech conference, as of then, a few years back, the most powerful supercomputer in terms of total processing power was nowhere near the equivalent of the overall processing power of the human brain. I mean, even just, looking at a picture and interpreting what that is, our brain is doing so many different, performing so many different calculations and doing all sorts of things. I don't think we really realize just how complex and incredibly powerful the human brain is. What I mentioned sometimes in my presentations is that we have to keep in mind that, the device that we're doing this interview on now, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff, Google, all of it originated from where? It all came from the power of the human mind. So we
Yep.
really need to realize that and continue to work on developing and nurturing the power of our brains, the power of our minds.
All right, so it's just Hollywood, magic, but like they've had so many movies where they always where they find this person. Oh my God, we figured out a way for this person to use 100% of their brain power, and now they have all these mystical, magical powers. Is it true? Like, do they always make that up? Like, how much do we really use of our brain? And what I'm trying to say is, like, why are we only using a certain part of it is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so I'm not sure on that. That's not really necessarily my field. It would be
Yeah, I know.
more of a
I was
yeah,
throwing it out there.
yeah, no problem. It would be more of a, for a brain scientist, neuroscientist, that would be their field. What I would just comment on based on what my field is,
Hmm.
memory skills development, that people come to me that say, they can't remember names. They're really bad at remembering training material that their company's sending them to, and so on. When they use these techniques that do actually activate more of the brain, that they wouldn't normally be using, they're just absolutely amazed at what they're able to do. So when we do tap into using more of the brain, I think it's very incredible what we are actually capable of doing.
My favorite brain movie where they used that plot line was the movie. It had John Travolta and it was Phenomenon. Remember where everybody thought he saw like aliens up in the sky, but come to find out he had this tumor that was like a hand on top of his dated more percentage of his brain stuff, and he could read like books. Like, I mean, could you do that? Because in the movie he read a bunch of books. Like, if I gave you 5 books and I said, I want you to read these 5 books, but I can quiz you on stuff about this book, how do you think you would do?
Yeah, so I saw that movie actually. I really enjoyed that movie a lot. Um, so for me, it's really skills that we're talking about and techniques that I would be using. So what I would be able to do is to just outline each chapter, pick out the main points, important
Mm.
points from all of the chapters, and then use these techniques to then commit all of that to memory. So it wouldn't be all 5 books word for word, but it would be
You would get the important things. You have a way of finding out the important things that are entailed into the book, right? Like, now, is there a difference when you're teaching things, like when you're giving somebody, hey, I need to study for a test, and you're trying to help them study for a test? Is part of it teaching them what could most likely be on this test? Do you kind of like put it from, this is the most important stuff, and this is some of the stuff you might need down here at the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I would recommend, but the student themselves would be better able to know what they think would be on the exam, what is important from each chapter. But I would have them pick out the important points, create an outline, and then commit it all to memory using the techniques that I teach. So I would teach them techniques to commit all of their notes to memory or all of their outlines to memory. So that would be my particular area. That's the part in which I would give input.
All right, Chester Santos, the International Man of Memory. Tell everybody once again how they can check out you online if they want to find any of your courses and stuff.
Yeah, so if people would like to go through some in-depth memory training, it's really fun, interactive in terms of the exercises. They will go to memoryschool.net. Visualize a net again to memorize that it's memoryschool.net, and the coupon code again is Tuddle. That will allow you to start with no enrollment fee at all. There is one small catch, in that I did set the coupon code up to be valid for 25 uses. So as long as you're one of the first 25 people to use Tuddle, it should work and set the fee to 0 to start out with.
All right, so this is probably going to make me a dick. So at the beginning of the interview, I said I was watching a movie. I wanted to see if you could remember what movie I was watching.
No, I don't remember at all.
Oh, come on. Do you remember my dad's? It was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And my dad's name was Wayne. So I was trying to throw it out there.
Oh, I didn't know you were currently watching the movie.
Yes, I was watching the movie.
Okay.
Oh, that's what I was saying. No, it's fine. I'll cut this part out. I was just wanting to throw it because I was like, holy crap, it would be impressive if you remembered it. But
No. I was thinking of that as an example that you just brought up of a Coen Brothers movie there.
Yes, you remember Coen Brothers. I'll give you the points. I'll give you the point. Chester, I really appreciate you coming on with me, and I want to have you on again anytime. Hopefully I didn't make myself look like I didn't know what I was talking about by asking some of these questions.
Oh, no, not at all. It was a great interview. Thank you so much for having me, Tuddle. I really appreciate it. And again, really anyone is capable of improving their memory. You just need to decide what you want to learn, pay attention, file that information away using certain techniques, and you'll be amazed at what you're capable of pulling off.
All right, Chester, man, I enjoyed this. This will be up later today, and I will tell my producer to send you all the links, okay?
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Chester, see ya. Bye.